Religions have hidden from you the greatest secret. You are creating your own hell right now, and you don't even notice. That is why you keep repeating the same sufferings, the same blockages, the same fears, believing the fault lies with something or someone out there. But today, I will reveal the shocking truth Seth taught, and that religions never wanted you to know. God is not who you think He is. A truth that not only explains why your life falls into these cycles, but also gives you back the power to stop suffering at its root. Now the decision is yours. Are you ready to see what no one ever had the courage to show you? Imagine for a moment that reality is like a huge blank canvas, and each of us holds a brush. What we call evil is nothing more than a smudge on the painting. Not because the brush is flawed, but because sometimes the one holding the brush is still learning to use it. Seth reveals that evil is not a dark, independent force wandering the universe, but a distortion of perception, a misreading of creation in motion. Just as a child learning to walk trips, not because the ground is evil, but because balance is still developing. So we too stumble in life's choices. When we see a mistake as absolute evil, we freeze learning and block the soul's natural expansion. Consider the example of a business person who goes bankrupt through poor management. At first glance, a painful failure. But from Seth's perspective, this apparent evil is actually a point of adjustment. The crisis exposes blind spots that needed illumination. It is creation calling the individual back into alignment with their own creative essence. If they embrace the lesson, they discover new paths to prosperity and wisdom they would never have accessed without the fall. Therefore, the error is not punishment, but a tool. The human mind, conditioned by fear, loves to classify. This is good, that is bad. Yet the universe does not operate with such simplistic labels. Suffering, often seen as proof of evil's presence, is merely friction necessary when we stray from who we truly are. Just as fever is not the enemy but the messenger that there is imbalance in the body. Discomfort is the alert that the soul is out of tune with its true creative frequency. Ignoring this would be like disabling the fire alarm while the house burns. Let's go deeper. Think of the caterpillar. If someone tried to open the chrysalis to help it, the result would be catastrophic. The resistance it faces is the strength training needed for its wings to be supported. The same happens to us. What we resist may paradoxically be what strengthens us. Seth reminds us that absolute evil does not exist because the very fabric of the universe is creative and self-correcting. There are no external forces bent on punishing. There are only learning fields, presenting themselves in different forms. Of course, it is hard to accept this when we are in the eye of the storm, when a partner betrays, when illness strikes, when a job disappears. The first impulse is to shout, "Why me? Why this?" Here, Seth's vision becomes revolutionary. He teaches that pain does not come from a sadistic external agent, but from the gap between who we are being and who we truly are. Evil in this sense is not an attack, but an uncomfortable mirror. It is the universe itself saying, here is something to be realigned. And precisely because it is an interpretive creation, evil can be redefined at any moment. It doesn't matter how messy the painting has become. The artist can always retouch the work. Life is generous that way. As long as there is awareness, there is freedom to recreate. And if we can transmute what we once called evil, we might also re-examine good in a new light. After all, are good and evil really fixed opposites, or just dynamic fields of creation? That is where the conversation gets even more fascinating. Now that we understand evil is not absolute, we need to take an even bolder step. Realize that good and evil are merely poles within a vast field of creative choices. Seth invites us to see the soul as a curious traveler, exploring contrasts, like an artist experimenting with light and dark tones to bring depth to the work. Without contrast, there is no form, no beauty, no expansion. The soul does not judge experiences morally. We do. With our limited beliefs, we slap on right or wrong labels, as though we were universal judges. For example, a person who loses their job and despairs may in time see that ending made way for a new project, connecting them to their true passion. The initial suffering served as a turning point. The soul does not view this transition as punishment, but as a change of scene on the stage of its evolution. Seth explains, each event carries infinite probabilities, and consciousness chooses which scenarios to live based on its need for growth and learning. This does not mean we should seek suffering deliberately. On the contrary, it means that when suffering arises, it should not be seen as defeat, but as a temporary teacher. Those who grasp this dynamic learn to ask in the face of pain, "What is this contrast trying to show me?" This inner dialogue transforms victims into conscious co-creators. Books like The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday illustrate this attitude well by showing how life's great masters turn adversity into fuel for success. And here is the most fascinating part. There is no fixed script. Each soul writes its own based on the choices it makes in response to contrast. Two people may face the same external situation and harvest completely different fruits precisely because interpretation and emotional response shape the next chapter. It is the famous mirror game Seth describes. What you project internally, you eventually attract externally. Suffering perpetuates only when we feed the helpless victim narrative. Thus, mature consciousness learns to surf contrast waves. Rather than fight what arises, it observes, understands, and extracts lessons. As Seth himself says, the soul seeks experience, not permanent comfort. Comfort may be transient, but expansion demands movement. It is like an athlete who knows the discomfort of training refines strength. Without resistance, there is no muscle. Without challenge, there is no mastery. This is how the creative field operates, offering choices and awaiting the soul's dance with them. But if good and evil are just open possibilities in the soul's grand workshop, what about the very source that allows this play? How does Seth's God function? So unlike the punishing deity many imagine. If there is no absolute evil, there is also no punishing God. There is something much greater. And that is exactly what we will discuss next. Here we begin to touch the raw nerve of many religious beliefs. For Seth, God is not an austere lord on a throne, jotting down our failures in a cosmic notebook. On the contrary, God is the very flow of creation in motion, an inexhaustible source of possibilities without judgment, without punishment, without favorites. How to explain this? Imagine the ocean. Its waves may be gentle or violent, but the ocean itself remains full, vibrant, offering its waters to all. So is the source. It creates, experiments, and observes itself through each of us. Many were conditioned early to picture a vigilant God, ready to punish deviations and reward obedience. But that childlike view serves social control more than true spiritual understanding. Seth reveals a multidimensional God who does not judge but offers total freedom to create. And here lies the challenge. With freedom comes responsibility. There is no God's will imposing destiny. There is your will co-creating in harmony with this creative source in every choice you make. Look around you. Every tree, every smile, every storm, every atom, all of it is God in action, expanding infinitely. There is no separation between creator and creature. You are not outside God, you are an extension of Him. When Seth speaks of multidimensionality, he means the source fragments itself into billions of simultaneous experiences lived by billions of consciousness, each creating its own reality, while feeding the whole with new information. It is a living organism breathing through us. This concept, though liberating, can frighten those taught to ask permission to live. After all, if God does not dictate every detail of our life, then everything is in our hands. Exactly. And that is why so many still seek a punitive figure. Because owning authorship of one's reality demands courage. It demands looking in the mirror and admitting, I am the creator of my joys and my misery. And by doing so, the person does not distance themselves from God, but merges with Him in a much deeper way. Seth describes this source as an intelligent, loving field, where all possibilities already exist, waiting to be chosen. There is no condemnation, only learning. No sin, only expansion. No punishment, only vibrational readjustment. Each time someone experiences pain, it is not the hand of an angry God weighing on them, but the automatic response of energy creating its reflection. It is like physics. Every action has a corresponding reaction. The difference here is that reactions are pedagogical, not vindictive. Knowing this raises an inevitable question. If we all co-create with this source, then how do collective realities arise? How does an entire society manifest wars, cultures, religions, shared paradigms? That brings us straight to the fascinating realm of collaborative creation, where individual consciousnesses weave their dreams together to form the world we live in. Now we open one of the most impressive chapters of creation: collaborative effort. Seth teaches that although each individual creates their own reality, we do not live isolated in bubbles. There is a subtle dance among consciousnesses where individual choices interweave, forming the collective fabric we call the external world. It is like a choir of unique voices creating together a grand symphony. Every thought, every emotion, every belief feeds this vibrational field we all share daily. Consider the birth of a culture. No civilization sprouts from nothing. It is the sum of beliefs of millions over centuries shaping values, laws, traditions. Modern society, with its technological advances and ethical dilemmas, is the fruit of countless conscious and unconscious intention. Every war, every scientific discovery, every work of art originated in individual minds, co-creating a shared reality. This collaborative effort operates like a vast mirror game. When a majority believes in fear, fear solidifies collectively. Economic crises, conflicts, mass illnesses emerge. Take pandemics, for example. They are not divine punishments nor mere random accidents. They are manifestations of emotional, social, and energetic imbalances cultivated in the collective field for decades. Chronic fear, disconnection from nature, unchecked competition, lack of empathy all saturate the global psychic field, until accumulated tension materializes as a global health crisis. It is not punishment, but reflection. The mirror the collective holds up to itself, forcing recognition of its own excesses and imbalances. The same applies to natural disasters and economic collapses. When the planet enters climatic breakdown, it is not because Earth hates us, but because the sum of our destructive choices returns as consequence. When markets crash, it reflects accumulated greed and collective insecurities fueling unsustainable bubbles. Seth teaches that matter is not origin, but the final result of long invisible vibrational processes. Matter simply obeys the commands of consciousness. But when a critical mass begins to vibrate confidence and abundance, we witness peaceful revolution, breakthroughs in health, cutting-edge technologies, knowledge expansion. That is why transforming your own vibration is also an act of service to the collective. Your energy feeds the common field. When you choose fear, you bolster the planet's fear field. When you choose love and trust, you strengthen the luminous network, anchoring positive change. That is why spiritual masters always repeat the IE. Work begins within each one. It is not a cliché, but pure energetic engineering. Seth reveals collective transformation always starts with individual transformation. We can think of it as an invisible digital data cloud where everyone uploads constantly. Our thoughts are the code programming this cloud. Every day we contribute to the collective algorithm, which then returns the experiences we are ready to receive. Thus, reality is not fixed, but a mutable field of probabilities always updating. If we want a more just world, we need to program it from within ourselves through individual transformation. Seth goes even deeper, explaining that even time and space are collectively shaped. The wars fought, religions born, empires fallen, all that was first, a sequence of shared thoughts, solidified. The physical world is not the cause, but the effect, and the most powerful part. New possibilities remain available even amid seemingly rigid structure. Just a critical mass of awakened consciousnesses can alter the entire course of a civilization. And if the collective is shaped this way by the beliefs we feed, it is clear religions also arise from the same mechanism. After all, how else explain that so many belief systems emerge in different eras and cultures, sharing such similar symbols, and why those images still influence us today? At this point, we enter the fascinating language of religious symbolism, the next step in our journey. Here is one of Seth's most delicate and at the same time liberating revelation. Religions with their symbols, myths, and rituals are simplified translations of deep cosmic truths. They act as bridges between the human soul and multidimensional realities that would otherwise be nearly impossible to comprehend fully. Think of parables, simple stories laden with hidden layers. The mind decodes as it matures spiritually. When someone sees an angel image, they may actually be accessing the symbolic representation of energetic forces communicating across dimensions. The fire of hell may symbolically reflect internal torment generated by unresolved guilt. Seth shows these images are neither absurd nor childish, but attempts by the collective unconscious to translate complex realities into forms the human mind can grasp. They are archetypes, as Jung would say, but alive, active, and malleable. The problem arises when symbols are taken literally, rigid, unquestionable. That is when idolatry distorts the original message, the punitive God, the seductive devil, heaven and hell as physical geography. All these are metaphors turned into dogmas, creating mental prisons that block the soul's true expansion. Seth warns the greatest spiritual trap is not doubt, but blind certainty. Literal attachment to symbols paralyzes consciousness's creative movement. And the most intriguing part, these current symbols did not emerge from a void. Seth reveals that long before our recorded history, whole civilizations, such as the pre-Earth people who existed before our current planet, already practiced this symbolic dance. When their world was lost through their own mistakes, fragments of their memory became myths that still echo in modern religion. It is no accident so many traditions share similar figures: sun deities, cosmic serpents, purifying floods. When we understand religions are maps, not destinations, we free ourselves from guilt and fear and begin to access the symbol's true invitation: self-knowledge. Each symbol is a mirror projected by the collective unconscious to help the individual dialogue with their own soul. That is why studying comparative religions or reading authors like Mircea Eliade or Joseph Campbell is not an act of doubt, but a deep spiritual dive. It is a quest to decode the soul's code. Now that we have grasped the symbolic nature of good, evil, and collective co-creation, it's time to look at the silent conductor behind many of these internal dramas, the ego. Seth explains that the ego in essence is not a villain, but a focusing instrument. It is the mechanism enabling us to live in linear time, perceive the here and now, and interact with the physical world. The problem is not its existence, but how we let it take total control of our consciousness's orchestra. The ego has a dangerous addiction: self-centeredness. It loves being absolute protagonist of the story, and for that creates fear, guilt, and comparison-laden narrative. It whispers, if something went wrong, it's because you failed or because the world is against you. Thus it twists good and evil to protect its sense of control. No matter if the facts are neutral, the ego quickly paints everything in dramatic tones, turning simple lessons into crises laden with unnecessary suffering. For instance, when someone is betrayed, the ego shouts, "That is evil. I have been wronged." In that shout, it traps the person in a cycle of pain, resentment, and victimhood. Higher consciousness, however, sees the same event as an opportunity to learn about self-love, boundaries, and emotional maturity. The ego feeds fear of loss and abandonment, while the soul just wants growth. They are two entirely different lenses on the same event. Seth shows that fear and guilt are the ego's favorite tools to keep the individual stuck in the illusion of separation. When a person lives in constant fear of mistakes, punishment, not being enough, they desperately try to control everything around them. And this need for excessive control blocks creation's natural flow. It is like rowing upstream, while life's river asks only for surrender and trust in its current. The ego also hates the unknown, so it resists any conscious expansion. It fears the collapse of its rigid certainties. When new spiritual ideas appear, like Seth's, the ego tends to reject them outright. This is dangerous. It is heresy. It is illusion. But in reality, it is just an invitation to emerge from the cocoon. What the ego calls insecurity, the soul calls adventure. What the ego calls chaos, the soul recognizes as fertile ground for new possibilities. Here we reach a pivotal point. If the ego distorts good and evil within the individual mind, how does that influence the internal worlds each person builds? How then does the soul create its own personal heavens and hells, fueled by these perceptions? That is the next key turn, where we will see how the individual shapes entire internal reality. And here we arrive at the most intimate and perhaps most transformative point of this entire journey, the inner universe. Seth reveals that each soul not only interacts with the external world, but also builds daily its own personal heavens and hells. We are not only creating outside, but inside. Often these inner worlds are even more powerful because they determine how we perceive and live everything that happens outside. The physical world obeys the vibrational quality of the inner world. Think of two people facing the same situation. One loses a job and plunges into endless despair, feeling like a failure, cursed, life's victim. The other sees the same event as a chance to reinvent, a signal that something new and more aligned awaits. What changed? Only each one's inner world. Seth explains, hell is not a geographic place, but a state of consciousness fed by recurring thoughts of fear, scarcity, and self-sabotage. Many live trapped in these mental hells without realizing it. Daily, they feed thoughts like, I am not capable, I am always betrayed, life is hard, nothing ever works out for me. Each repetition of these negative mantras solidifies a vibrational field that begins to feel like an inescapable reality. But it is not an external punishment. It is the self's active and constant creation. It is like decorating a dark room every day with new pictures of pain and frustration. Conversely, the inner heaven can be built just as strongly. When someone starts feeding thoughts like, I learn from every challenge, everything works together for my growth, I am part of something greater, and I am supported, they create an internal atmosphere of peace and trust. It does not mean problems will cease, but how they experience them changes completely. The external world continues, but internal suffering dissolves. Seth shows the soul has full freedom for this inner creation, and the more conscious someone becomes of this process, the faster they can transform their internal states. Techniques such as meditation, mental reprogramming, positive affirmations, deep emotional therapy, and even simple practices like daily gratitude operate as powerful tools of vibrational realignment. They are not just nice exercises, but acts of soul engineering repositioning the being on the well-being frequency. Now that you know, you can no longer hide behind excuses. You understand there is no absolute evil out there punishing you. You understand there is no punitive God judging every step. What exists is your consciousness creating at every moment your own heaven or your own hell. So I ask you, how many times have you noticed repeating the same mistakes? How many times does the same suffering return under different names and faces? How much longer will you keep handing your power over to beliefs that only keep you imprisoned? Now you have the key. The question is, will you use it? If you want to continue deepening this knowledge and learn how to change your reality from the inside out, subscribe to the channel now and hit the bell, because here we go straight to the Oedipus root, and with each video you free yourself a little more.